We don't, for a start, so we all start on a level playing field, we don't make any claim to know everything about this whole topic. We're still learning, as I'm sure many of you are out there. Really what we've called today for, I think, is more of a meeting than a sense of you guys sitting there listening to us talk and try and tell you that what we know. Correct me if I'm, please jump in at any point. The whole point of today is really going to be sharing what we're aware of, and hopefully as well gaining as much stuff together that we can do. So, take notes, and I think we'll have quite an interesting day.
We don't claim to be experts on anything except our own experience, and what we're here to do is to share our experiences and the knowledge that we gleaned with you, so you can find your own remedy for whatever you want to do. That being said, we must also stress that we are not giving legal advice to anybody here present, and that understanding must be clear.
I guess the purpose then is to get everyone taking control of their own affairs, using whatever tools they want to use, because everyone will want to achieve different things with this. But we all have a same main goal, which is to liberate ourselves from the kind of incremental tyranny that's becoming quite obvious.
And there's a way that you can distinguish between the person and the living soul to be treated in a completely different way by the state. But you have to establish this, because hardly anybody who works for the state understands what is really going on. So you have to walk this path with your eyes wide open, knowing that you're going to have to convince a lot of people to get these things done, and that you can't be disheartened if it doesn't work initially. It's a very, very deep rabbit hole. And
I think one of the biggest concepts and underlying principles behind this whole thing is really individual responsibility. I think, we've been, if any of you have watched Robert Menard or read his book With Lawful Excuse, you see that page where he says governanny, which I thought was quite good. But the government really is acting as a nanny, because we're not saying, hold on, we're actually old enough to do things our way, and actually we're responsible enough to do it, to be responsible and to act correctly. It's all fraud. Starting with the central banks. Now, bearing in mind, the central banks are private institutions. So we live in England, let's look at England. Well, I'm not going to talk about the Federal Reserve System, hopefully too much today. But the Central Bank of England was privatised in 1694. It's been a private bank since then. It's a for-profit entity. Now, if we imagine, just hypothetically speaking, that we are at the start of let's say that we're the central bank up here, and this is a beginning of a population for this country. We've got no money in circulation whatsoever at the moment. Well, what the government's done is they're going to come to us, the central bank, and say, can we borrow money off you? Now, we're going to lend that money to them, and we're going to charge them interest. Now, let's say there's no money in circulation at the moment at all. We've got zero. We've created £1 million, put that into circulation, and added interest onto it. So you've got the million that we've stuck into the money supply. So there's now £1 million in circulation in the country, which is in this room, okay? Now, with interest on top, let's say that million is, we call that the principal, and we'll call principal plus interest, which is what needs to be paid back to the central bank. So with the interest on top, we're looking at 1,200,000, let's say, okay, hypothetically. Where's that 200,000 going to come from? It can't come from anywhere. The only place it can come from is central bank again. Therefore, central banks lend money to the government. We pay it back with it. We pay the interest back through taxation, and also a whole host of other things that taxation goes under. And effectively, what's going on is the bank are charging interest on something that they didn't actually have in the first place. They've created it out of nowhere. It's completely fictional. Yeah. So now, if you imagine that concept in banks, you're going to get a credit card, you're going to get a loan, you're going to get a mortgage. It's exactly the same principle.
When they lend money, they only need to have 10% in reserve, okay, which means that 90% of the principal can be reissued as fiat currency, which is backed by nothing until you work for it or borrow it. And so this cycle is perpetuated down several levels, and we're reaching a point now where we're getting to the theoretical maximum. It's a mathematical certainty that if we go too far, it will all crash. or we'll have to print more money to cover it. And you've seen what's happened in Zimbabwe, where they just print more money. It doesn't solve the problem, it just expands the debt and puts it into the future. And so later on, we'll all be liable for that debt, and that's never going to stop. So our children, our grandchildren will always be in debt, and the debt will always increase.
And in 1933, the gold standard was taken out of the monetary system. And therefore, since then, all the money that we've been using to attempt to pay debts has just been more debt. You can't go and swap it for anything except when you have a contract with another individual company to swap that for something else, whether it's goods or services. Yeah. So it's just our acceptance of the system that allows it to continue functioning.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, but it's not, now we've reached a point where it's not even backed by all the goods and services in the country. There is more theoretical money than actual substance. And it doesn't matter whether it's gold or oil or your labour or whatever it is. It just doesn't exist. They're just making up numbers, and these numbers can keep expanding. And this is the problem.
When people ask what the Freeman movement, if indeed it is a movement, is about, the easiest way to explain it to people is to say it's about taking individual responsibility for your life and accepting that through our mutual cooperation we can all benefit. You know, we are of the belief that it's not right the way things are run. So we want to first take responsibility for running our own lives in the right way, and that means not taking part in any kind of corruption. Just because the state says that there's a law which says that you've got to do it, it doesn't actually mean that there is a law. Once you set yourself free, you can help others be free, and therefore you become freer because of that. We believe that you have to put something in to get something out.
Who's heard of the Security and Prosperity Partnership? Okay, and some people think that's about keeping the land actually secure and increasing the prosperity of the people. It's not. They're actually moving securities, and securities in the sense that we're going to talk about, from the United States into Canada. And because Canada per head is very rich indeed, the resources there are incredible, and that wealth is trickling out, and they're doing this exchange of pretend money and real substance. So Canada's being drained slowly to death by this process, and that will lead to a union of North America. Now we've got the European Union, Brussels trying to take control, and an organisation called Common Purpose. Who's heard of them? Yeah, everyone. And they're going to bleed our country dry, and a small number of people at the top who we didn't elect in the European Commission will benefit, and we won't. So this is a problem that we've got to deal with, and that's why we need the numbers of people saying, hang on a minute, this isn't right.